Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I have with me the famous Joey Mattingly. Joey and I have sort of circled each other on social media. I want to say for close to a decade, and we're finally actually talking, which is kind of fun, kind of interesting. But before I jump into it, Joey, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Joey Mattingly. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Utah. I'm a pharmacist and then a PhD trained health economist. So I've been working on drug pricing related topics for going on like 20 years now.
When did you graduate?
I got out of pharmacy school in 2009, but like I literally got into I went to pharmacy school because of drug pricing issues. My grandmother couldn't afford her medications, and so but no one told me health economics was a career, so I did pharmacy, and so uh,
You got
yeah, honestly,
bamboozled into pharmacy?
yeah, it was a long way around because high school guidance counselors like, oh, that sounds pharmacist sounds like a good career for you. So I went that way, and we had a great college of pharmacy at the University of Kentucky, close to where I grew up. I grew up in Kentucky, so I got very lucky.
Very cool. So before we jump into this, can you talk a little bit for those people who are going, I'm stuck in retail, I don't know what else to do? You're doing something different because I always like to address that question that pops up. What can a retail pharmacist who's run out of options is now going, wait a second, Joey's doing this whole pharmacoeconomics thing. I don't know what
Mm.
that means. I took a class about it in pharmacy school, absolutely hated it because to this day, 20 years later, I still don't understand how pharmacoeconomics works. So kudos to you
Yeah.
for figuring that out. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, so first, I absolutely loved retail pharmacy. So I was a pharmacy technician, pharmacy manager, and then actually became a district manager for the Kroger company. I uh, absolutely loved the opportunity that Kroger gave me, this large grocery store chain. So my experiences, while I managed some really tough stores, um, overall, like my experiences were quite positive. And I definitely, so I've seen a lot of very frustrated, upset pharmacists, and I totally empathize with some of the challenges because of some of the dark days that I even had myself. But I work with a lot of people who also have really positive experiences, and it's like, I don't know anyone who 100% always loves their job.
Oh,
Like
that's not true. I love my job all the time.
well, I do. I mean, I do there, but there are days that
Oh
I
yeah,
will get
fair
really
enough.
frustrated at something, something that'll drive
Fair
me
enough.
nuts, and I'll lose sleep over it, and I'll have anxiety, and
Yeah.
but overall, like
Yeah.
I do think there's a challenge though with person job fit. Like I think that a lot of people end up in a retail space, and again, as a faculty member, I've been fighting or working against the rising cost of college and the rising cost of pharmacy school because I think a lot of my colleagues, again myself, I graduated with about $250,000 worth of debt, going to a public institution, even having good grades and all those things. Like it's just that's how expensive 7 years of college, especially 4 years of a doctorate program, is anymore. And I think we have a lot of young individuals with a lot of student debt that end up in a spot. And I think like maybe you said it, or I don't know if I heard that, but like that kind of feeling trapped, feeling like they can't get out. And so I think you get stuck with like, okay, you're making, $120,000 a year, which is a great salary. And you've got this large student debt bill, and maybe you've bought a house, maybe you're trying to raise kids, maybe you're the main breadwinner of the family, and maybe it's really important that you have that job. And so I do think it puts a lot of people in a really tough position. I was really fortunate that when I got engaged and was getting married, my wife was really supportive of me taking that pivot because I was pretty well compensated moving into the district manager role with and at an early age, 27, 28. So I was on track to doing a lot of really cool stuff, maybe in the corporate world, but I took a big step back. I took like a 30% pay cut to go into academia, but it was still a good salary, and so I was able to make the finances work pretty easily. But I can totally understand that a lot of individuals are probably like, well, yeah, that's great for you, but what do I do? Like how, like what are my opportunities? And so my goal now is with my students and with any alumni that reach out, I try to like talk through like, well, what do you want to do? Like why'd you choose pharmacy to begin with?
So you answered the question of why. I do want to clarify to the extent that wasn't clear. I loved my time in retail. I did about 10 years in retail, probably longer than that. And I'll be. I lived outside Philadelphia. I lived inside Philadelphia. I never touched retail inside Philadelphia. I don't think I could handle it. I don't think I had the chops for that. But outside Philadelphia, I loved it. I had some great patients and all that good stuff. I've worked in most types of pharmacy. I think the problem with retail for me was the fact that, and we're completely going down the wrong alley, but that's fine. We'll get to the topic we're going to discuss anyways. But the problem with retail for me was I didn't get the opportunity to use all the skill sets, all the tool sets that I was taught in pharmacy school. So it was the repetitiveness that bored me. The fact that I felt like I was on a conveyor belt, just trying to chug medications out. If I had the opportunity to actually help patients the way I thought I could, and when every so often you'd get that opportunity, it was amazing to do that. But I think that's really what destroyed retail pharmacy the way I experienced sometimes. And I think independent pharmacies get to do that a little bit more. Today's news, I think CVS is laying off, I think 2,000 people. I think Walgreens, I just had a live stream earlier today where I talked about Walgreens having issues as well. So I think retail has opportunities. I think what retail needs to do is evolve, and that evolution will help with job satisfaction, and it will help with the pharmacies themselves surviving. But you have a thought?
Yeah, no, and again, I usually start from the beginning with my students. You know, so many young people looking forward to going into pharmacy. You know, I try to tap into why. Like everyone has different whys, like why they decide. Maybe their parents were pharmacists. Maybe their parents are in healthcare, and you know, in some aspect, or you know, everyone has a different story as to why you're doing it. But I kind of want to know, like, I want to get through all the other junk, you know, like, okay, is it because you saw that pharmacy was a high paying job and whatever? Like what is your main motivation? You know, do you, if you had, so I always kind of start asking my students, like, what would you do if at graduation, you know, your grandparents gifted you $20 million and you didn't know about it and you just got it at graduation, and it's enough money for you to put it in the bank and draw interest off of it for the rest of your career so you don't have to work. So then what would you do? What would you do for your, how would you spend your time? And if a student can walk through, like think through that mental exercise and say, well, you know, I'd love to travel the world. Okay, good. Now I can work with that. Let's find you a career that supports travel. If you say, you know, I want to raise a big family and I want to, you know, I want to coach my kids in soccer and football and stuff, I say, okay, great. Let's focus on a job that's going to allow the flexibility and that, you know what I mean? So part of it's like, I want to hear who are these humans? You know, what are their motivations? What do they want to do with their life? Because you can do a lot of things to help people that's not pharmacy. And so I want the people who want to be in pharmacy to be in pharmacy. I want the people who want to be at a Walgreens counter because they love it, not the people that are there because they're stuck or what, you know, as we may have alluded to.
So this is actually something I created for so I used to work at a hospital, and one of my residents asked me this question: Darshan, what should I do after pharmacy school? After I graduated pharmacy. And I always was told, you need to go into residency, otherwise you're not a good pharmacist.
Right.
We all heard that. Yeah. And I literally created this chart for her as I was sitting in the pharmacy. And
that's cool.
I've had multiple people go, wait, I want to use this because this is awesome. And that's really where it came down from. Like, are you looking for adventure?
Oh, I will 1,000% share this. Yeah, if you've posted this, I will share it for sure. That's cool.
Yeah, so I think that's what we need to do. But again, we're going down a completely different path than
I know. We talk about drug pricing. We'll get back there, but that's cool.
But I'm gonna stop sharing that for a second. There you go. But I guess the question that I wanted other people to know or to ask was, what did you have to do after pharmacy school to become a pharmacoeconomist?
Yeah, so I knew I needed more training. There are paths for pharmacists to go do maybe a fellowship. You could do a fellowship in industry or managed care, or one of those areas are likely good areas, or at a university focusing on that. For me, I felt like I needed the PhD, so I found a really amazing mentor in Daniel Mullins at the University of Maryland. And also Maryland had other amazing faculty like Julia Slako and Aberia Nukwa and Fadia Shaya Eleanor Perfetto. They had just all these amazing faculty that I just wanted to learn from. And so I got really lucky that I was able to, work. I was able to teach pharmacy management because that was my expertise at the time. I had managed several pharmacies, ran several pharmacies. So I helped teach the pharmacy management course, taught other courses, and had like a non-tenure track faculty job. And then I worked part-time on my PhD for about 4.5 years to get that.
So what we're saying to people who, and I use the word trap. Maybe I did. I can't remember if I did or didn't.
Oh, I may have added it because I hear it a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. So I'm not shying away from the word as much as the way we're phrasing this is, if you want to move into a pathway like that, what you want to consider is, it's not going to be simply, oh, I can just move to another job. There is additional education. There is additional training. And I would say go do it, because it opens up opportunities for you. So now that we've established that you have like all these years of research, your PhD, you said, did I catch this correctly? You were an MBA as well?
Yeah, so that's what was so funny when I was in pharmacy school. I literally, Darshan, I told my economics professors, I told all my like people I was like trying to get advice from in undergrad. I was like, I want to do these drug pricing things, and economists did a lot of it, like general like labor economists or whatever. Like they don't know health economics, so they don't. No one ever said, why don't you do a PhD? So I did the PharmD MBA, and so I took MBA courses at night while I was in pharmacy school, which Kentucky allowed us to do that, and that was really cool to be able to do that. But it was a long 4 years trying to complete both those degrees at the same time, but it was well worth it. But yeah, I didn't find out till later that wasn't the path that I really needed. But
yeah, I think I've seen this done at other universities, and that lines up training you to run a hospital pharmacy for the most part. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. Anyways, so you now have this experience. You now sort of know the underpinnings of how drug pricing works. So let's ask the multi-billion-dollar question.
Right.
How does drug pricing work?
Yeah. I mean, the way I explain it and tried to explain it in my testimony to Congress was, one of the biggest misnomers that we have with drug pricing is that in the United States, we actually, we've made a trade-off, and we've made a trade-off since the 1960s. If you think about all the way back to Hatch-Waxman in 62, Hatch-Waxman in 84, Kefauver, Harris in 62. If you think about the evolution of the market in the U.S., we have an incredibly competitive, low-cost generic market, and we have an incredibly expensive brand market. And these are two. And so when we're talking drug prices, we need to make sure we specify which market are we talking about. And the way I like to talk, and actually, Darshan, this is why I am a huge nerd. I have a 60-year-old book, when Estes Kefauver's main books talk, outlining what happened, the hearings in 59 and 60. And, basically, we've made the trade-off in the U.S. to say, if a drug company brings an innovative product to market, we are going to honor that intellectual property for a period of time and allow them a government supported, sponsored, if you will, like a monopoly power. Now monopoly power is probably too, that's kind of the buzzword, but really, like, you have your exclusivity for your product, but you don't have a monopoly if there's other like molecules in the market too. But anyway, like you'll have for one product, the branded pharmaceutical, there's no generic available for a period of time. And that's the period where we pay, like, the famous, like, let's look across the countries and, oh, we pay this and this, Denmark pays this and US pays this. And it's often based on that list price, which is then where it gets kind of twisted, because for insured individuals, Medicaid, Medicare, or commercial, no one's paying the list price. The list price does have an impact potentially on co-payments, and does have an impact on some other things in terms of the calculation. But at the end of the day, the net price is what we need to be talking about for a lot of branded pharmaceuticals. But with that said, like, because of this amazing incentive, the pharmaceutical market is overall profitable, but we often focus on the winners, right? We focus on those who got a drug through and approved. We fail to, like, also talk about the 4 or 5 or 10 drugs that failed to get us to the winner. And so we often forget about that overarching investment. But yeah, we bring this huge investment in, and because of that, a child today born with cystic fibrosis will has the life expectancy 20 years longer than a child born with cystic fibrosis in the 90s. A patient who gets infected with hepatitis C can have that virus cured today, unlike 20 years ago. So, like, it's the trade-off that I think we're often missing is that, yeah, we are paying more in the short run for branded pharmaceuticals, but look what we're getting for it, and we don't really talk about the value that we're getting for some of these.
So I have so many questions that popped out of that thing. Let's start with the first one. I think you talked about the two different industries, and I agree with you 100%. I think there's the branded industry and the generic industry, and from a payment perspective, I think branded companies, by definition, as we all know, have significant margin, and they make a boatload of profit on the investment that they've made, and quite bluntly, appropriately so, because to me, I compare this to going to Vegas and betting. I think it lands up being like $1.6 million every single day. You don't care what the result is. You just bet it the next day all over again with everything you had before. And you keep doing that for, I think, it's 20 years. And that lands up being about $4 billion. That's what every pharmaceutical company is theoretically investing for every successful drug. So that sort of makes sense. But then there's the generic industry, and those companies are shutting down. And they're shutting down because they're just not being reimbursed enough. You talked about it as being competitive. I would argue it is unprofitable at the current structure it is. So I think we can have a whole discussion on generics, and we'll have that discussion at some point. Around branded, I think branded gets even more complicated because there is the element of, we have to deal with these companies saying that we want to charge all of this money. But the truth is, do they actually even want to charge all of that money? I've been in situations where I've had owners of rare disease state drugs come out and say, I want to give this as close to unprofitable as I can possibly get it so that I can keep running the company. That's all I'm looking to do. I'm not trying to make a huge profit. But then the insurance company comes in and says, look, we can only do this if we can give a certain discount because we've promised those discounts to our to basically the people who are subscribing to our services, which causes the price to be doubled, tripled in some cases, just so the appropriate discount can be associated with it.
Right.
My question to you, and that's where we get to the point you are making. Well, there are two things come out of that. The first is the point you are making, which is the difference between the list price and the actual price paid by the healthcare system. And when I say the healthcare system, I mean patients, employers, governments, etc. Alternatively, we have now entered for the first time in the history of America a structure where prices will be determined by the government, which is as part of a negotiation, which is the IRA. And that's a different beast altogether. So we're going to touch that on a different day. So now we're focusing on just one piece, which is the cost of drugs as determined by PBMs, and what are their levers? How do they decide what should be the cost of a drug, and why are they? I mean, I have friends who work at PBMs, and they go, "It's the market deciding this." Do you agree with that statement? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack. Let's start with just the idea that if a drug manufacturer wants to set a lower price, because this came up. Did you follow the hearing last? Yeah, so there was the Senate hearing where Bernie Sanders had the Novo Nordisk CEO on, and they talked.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So he talked about the rebate, and the CEO was correct that, like, they've had experiences where lowering the list price and taking away the rebate can then create a scenario where the PBM market would now not prefer the lower list price drug. I studied a lot of my early health economics work was in hepatitis C. It was amazing because Gilead had come out with Harvoni and Sovaldi and Harvoni, the blockbusters, and then 2 years later, Zepatier from Merck came out and they tried a low list price strategy and had they just fell flat. Like, Merck has virtually no Hep C investment these days. And we've seen that over and over again where we see the high list, high rebate. And so where a lot of people are, I think, missing the bigger picture. And I'm spending a lot of time thinking through the best way to write about this and explain this. Um, the easy, like the quick, let's get a like and a retweet and get attention, is the PBM is the devil. The PBM came up, this is the PBM profit scheme, right? That's the easy answer.
Right.
But then you got to, like, the more intelligent thing to do is then ask, well, why would a PBM do that? Like, what would be the PBM's motive to do that? Is it purely their profit, or like is there a, how does a PBM get its business? So then your next logical thing is, okay, if Joey and Darshan start our own PBM tomorrow and we go into the market, how do we get customers? And who are our customers? Are our customers American citizens? No, they're not. Their customers are employers, for commercial or Medicare, Medicaid, right? So your customers are people who are purchasing pharmacy benefit services for a population. And then so let's walk down the path for an employer. So an employer, how does an employer? You don't just like go to Walmart and pick out a PBM off the shelf. You put a proposal online, or you send out a proposal to different companies and you say, here's a request for proposals. We want you to bid on our business. If we have 30,000 employees and beneficiaries, what is it going to cost you? What is it going to cost us to administer the benefits? What's the setup? The PBM's got to respond to it. The way PBMs often are judged in terms of price competitiveness is, what can they guarantee the employer in terms of rebates? And in terms of, and what's sort of been discussed is this overall aggregate rebate amount for the whole population. So it's not like I'm going to get 40% on Humira. It is, can I get 35, 40, 50% rebate guarantee on the entire spend, and knowing that, like, generics, you're not going to have rebates. It's really getting it all from these branded products. And so what ends up happening so our PBM, Joey Darshan, pharmacy benefits manager, we bid and we tell an employer we're going to guarantee them 30% aggregate rebate guarantee for the population. Then we go to negotiate with drug companies. You have a company that says, hey, we don't have a rebate, zero rebate, but your price is lower. Drug company B, I have a higher price with a higher rebate. Oh, if I can nab these rebates, the net price may be comparable or even a little bit higher, but the rebate dollar, I can now fulfill my contract obligation to the employer group. I know it sounds stupid, but this is kind of as simple, and it's that simple. Like, I actually think I think it's, well, maybe it's more complicated than that, but there's a level of simplicity here that I think a lot of people keep missing because they just want to point at one bad guy. And I'm not saying the employer's bad. I'm not saying the PBM's bad. I'm not saying the drug company's bad. I'm telling you that this is just a very, like, I think it's kind of straightforward. I actually think but no one wants to peel back the layers of the onion.
But it's interesting. I think it's today or this week I heard about a proposal. I want to say it's California. I could be wrong, but someone came out and said, we just want to do a fixed price per drug. That's the cost of the PBM charges. No rebates, no discounts, none of that stuff, just a fixed price. Why do you think that's not a good idea?
Oh, I don't know if it's a good. I mean, I don't want to say good or bad. I don't know if I have a position there. Because that's where, like, even talking to Congress, I was like, I don't know if you're going to get me to say I support this or that. I just
let me rephrase. What are the advantages, disadvantages? How about that?
Yeah. So this is what I've been, like, racking my brain over, and I hope maybe someone in the audience will be smart enough to reach out and help me. I would love to really get to the bottom of some of this. Is if say we start a business, say I like Joe's coffee shop. I decided to start a little coffee chain here in Utah, and I open up 10 locations. Maybe I got 150 employees, and I want to offer and I want to fund the benefits, pharmacy benefits for them. How do I get a contract that can reduce the uncertainty that, say, a new drug is going to come on the market, and now I've got to pay for, and one of my patients has a child with cystic fibrosis, or one of my employees, or what if one of my employees contracts HIV and they need chronic, HIV therapy, or you list any whatever.
Sure.
The employers are put in this really weird predicament where you're trying to align the employer's goals to like maintain some type of predictability, and okay, here's what these costs are going to be. We can budget them. We can tell our employees, hey, if you want to buy into our plan, this is your contribution to the premium, and so we can set that. And I think most employers want stability, and I don't know if there's just been a trade-off in people going ahead and being willing to take on, like, basically saying, sure, okay, PBM, if you make a profit here, that is what it is. I get my stability, and that's why I think that there's a lot of employers that have been okay with it. I do think that some employers get to a point where, like, hey, wait a second, I think we can do better, and they're trying to maybe work on bringing their costs down in different ways. But at the end of the day, you're still managing a population of employees, and take the PBMs out of it tomorrow. Like, you still, like, how are you going to make the determination? You have a bunch of employees, maybe a handful of them would love to try a new weight loss drug like the GLP-1s. Do you pay for that? Do you pay for the weight? Like, so what was misleading with Senator Sanders' testimony, or the hearing, he would put up on the board like prices in Denmark, prices in Germany. I literally had a call on Friday with a reporter in Denmark to go over, like, no, Denmark, you don't, if you're obese, not diabetic, if you're overweight and you want to use one of these drugs, you can't get subsidies from the government to get Ozempic. So that's super misleading to give like a government subsidized price or whatever, and then to compare it to a US like list price. Like, it's so misleading. So it's like, look, if you're in Denmark, you still don't have universal access to all the Ozempic you want. So I actually think at the end of the day, we're all still managing, like, how do we manage the cost? And the way I try to explain it to my students is if I want to pay for something, if I go to the doctor, and let's say I want to lose weight and I decide I want to go on a GLP-1. If the doctor prescribes it for me, I am free in this country to take that prescription to any pharmacy I want and to pay the cash price for that medication, right? So say I wanted to pay the $1,000 or $1,100 a month, a list price for that drug, and say I could afford it. Okay, so that's where we maybe get into some disparities of who can afford things and who can't. No one is stopping me. We are free in this country to go do that. However, if I want to pull out my insurance card and I want to ask the 30,000 other Utah employees to contribute to my care, well, now it's no longer a Joey's decision. Now it's a decision that's like, what's best for all 30,000 of us? Because if I take money out of the pot for our insurance, what if there are other people that maybe need other drugs more, or what if it raises premiums for everybody on the plan? And now people who aren't sick, who are perfectly healthy, are also paying more.
So I think that's a really interesting question to ask, right? Because you're asking the question of if you should other people pay for my. I'll be honest. Like, I take Manjaro. I actually have diabetes, so I actually take Manjaro, and it's a valid question to ask. Like, why should anyone else pay for my diabetes treatment? But isn't that exactly the point? The point is that, let's take obesity, just for argument's sake. Let's say, because that's an easy sort of pick me kind of situation. The problem with obesity is it's actually part of metabolic syndrome, which means that you address that obesity, it addresses everything else. And if it's addressing everything else, whether we're talking heart disease, whether we're talking about weight loss, whether we're talking about diabetes, in the end, the 30,000 of us still benefit. So from that perspective, should we be looking at how much the drug costs go up or how much the healthcare costs go down?
So so this will maybe bring back some memories of the hepatitis C debate. So does an employer benefit if your heart attack isn't going to happen until you're in your 60s and you move to Medicare? So now we have this weird, like, wait a second, is there this, like, while you're young and relatively healthy, do we not spend, let's lose the weight and let's extend our life, let's have better quality later in life, right? But what if the group actually benefiting isn't the group that's paying for it? And we had this battle with Medicaid and Medicare. Hepatitis C patients in 2012, 13, 14, when those drugs were coming out, there was a lot of debate around the country around like, wait, if you're on Medicaid and you're 59, 60 years old, your fibrosis isn't too bad, you're Hep C positive, should we deny this while you're on Medicaid for the next 5 years, 6 years? And then when you go over to Medicare, let Medicare deal with it, right? Like that sounds awful. Doesn't that sound so stupid? But
Yeah.
but you have to think about like who's paying for it. And so the benefits, if the benefits are long term, it's actually this weird, crazy, wait, I don't know if I want to pay for it now because I won't see the benefit. Or what if the University of Utah pays for my treatment? And then I get healthy, whatever, maybe it's a short term thing, and I get healthy. And then, the Kulkarni law firm decides to bring on a health economist, and
Right.
you hire me, and I leave the University of Utah. Now
Yeah.
my future health gains are accumulated to your firm, not the University of Utah. So it's this really stupid kind of like, it comes down to these really dumb payment decisions based on who's benefiting. But if all employers would join in and say, hey, you know what? If everyone lost a little bit of weight, this would be a good thing. If we all had similar coverages, I actually think that, yeah, we would see benefits across the board.
And I think, isn't that sort of the point of single payer? And I'm not advocating for single payer.
Right.
Full disclosure, I'm actually a fan of single payer, but I don't understand it enough to know why it's a good idea or not. So someone can very easily tell me it's a terrible idea and I'd have to believe them. But but assuming you went down the single payer route, it addresses at least this one issue,
It
which
does.
is who benefits.
Absolutely.
So I really have to bring you back because I did promise you about 30 minutes and we're already past
Oh,
that.
yeah, we got to watch. Yeah, we could talk all day. I'll jump on again sometime if you want in the future.
That would be amazing because I really also wanted to get into the games everyone plays and in the end, who lands up benefiting. Because one of the arguments I always make, and this is a weird sort of tangent I'm going to go on, but I promise it comes back. You talked about how in the end, the PBMs are playing this quote unquote game because employers need you to play this game because they made certain commitments to the employers. In the same way, I would argue that pharma is not blame free. Pharma prices are what they are, but that's because, again, investors are saying, I want to see a return on the money that I've put in for the last 20 years. And I want to see a return on that because why else would I do it? And people say, well, that's greedy investors, except those investors are us. We're those investors. I'm not putting my money into any kind of company that's not making a profit. And you're seeing pension funds put their money in. And if my pension fund put my money into a company that wasn't making profits, you better believe I expect them to change where they're investing their money. So it really comes back to the whole question of who should be paying for this and who actually benefits. It comes out of one pocket but goes into another. It comes out of the investor pocket and goes into the patient pocket, or goes from the patient pocket and goes into the investor pocket. And the question is that appropriate or is that a problem? And that's true, again, as employers as well. Employers are still just people running their day-to-day business. I also wanted to get into, hopefully next time, this conversation on rebates and like what exactly is a rebate? How does it show up? I'd love to talk about DIR fees. Maybe talk even about this 20% margin. And I don't know enough about it, but I understand that PBMs have to work with a certain profit margin. They can't go crazy with it anymore. Is that accurate? Or did I just make that up?
Oh, I'd have to follow up with you on that. I'm not familiar with that.
I'd read that somewhere and I didn't know if it was true or not. Like they can't go now, I want 80% profit and 20% is the money I just used for the rest of to actually manage my fund. But we'll ask that question. But then the thing that I'm seeing right now with a lot of insurers, especially with CVS right now, today's news again was that CVS is considering breaking up because they're talking about splitting their PBM business away from their pharmacy business, going back to the same point you were making a little bit ago, which is, does one piece of it benefit another piece? And does it land up affecting, say, an independent pharmacy owner in that scenario? Because now the PBM will push towards its own capitated pharmacies, if you will, or captured pharmacies, not capitated. But those are all questions for another day. telling you why you need to come back, listen to Joey talk again, because let's be honest, I can't tell you the information he can, and he's all kinds of amazing. But before we go, how can people reach you, Joey?
Oh yeah, so my email is just my name, joey.mattingly@utah.edu. It's also on the website. So definitely, obviously, if a huge influx of questions come in, I might be a little bit delayed getting back. But also on Twitter at Joey Mattingly, or at least for the time being. I don't know about you. I don't feel like the engagement on Twitter is the same as it used to be years ago.
Not
It's a little weird now. But yeah, feel free to reach out in any way, and yeah, hopefully it's a productive conversation. I know this topic or these topics can get very charged and very heated and very emotional quickly for a lot of individuals, and I totally understand. Like there's a lot of stakeholders that are involved in all aspects of this, and so I try to look at it. I'm fortunate that I get to look at it from an academic perspective. I understand that I don't, I'm not I'm not like an employee of a pharmaceutical company or a PBM or a pharmacy anymore. So I do know that I'm blessed to talk about it from like an academic perspective. So it's not to discount others that are like in the trenches or in the real world doing those things. It's just that I'm a big nerd and I like to analyze these things, and hopefully having the nerds talk about this stuff in a way can help everyone else kind of move forward.
I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much again.
Great.